Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons, back with some signature guitar lick goodness for you here, from the master himself, Eddie Van Halen. Alright, before we get into it, I had planned to do this video before Eddie's passing as a result of this big poll I carried out over a series of months. I didn't want to release it too soon after October the 6th because while it could be seen as a tribute, the cynical part of my brain sees this kind of thing as trying to capitalise or make an opportunity of someone's death, which I just don't agree with and don't want to do. Not to take away from the wave of tribute videos, the ones of which I saw were really great and actually quite beautiful in their own right. People talking about their personal experiences with Eddie, or getting 150 players to play Eruption at the same time, creating this kind of really nice but haunting natural reverb collage of players. It just felt weird to me to release this specific lesson too soon after without at least addressing this topic. I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone, we all pay homage and grieve in our own ways. I don't really know how well I've explained all this, but it felt really wrong not to at least address the situation a little bit. But R.I.P. Eddie, you will be missed. Okay, heavy stuff aside, I've tried to put these licks in ascending difficulty, but I mean, this isn't exactly beginner stuff. Van Halen's off-the-cuff style of playing was highly creative, inventive, and had that element of a kind of energetic, fun spontaneity, while still being controlled enough that his ideas made sense, something that I think most of us can only ever aspire to. Personally, I rank him up there with the likes of Robert Johnson, Django Reinhardt, Jimi Hendrix, in terms of taking the guitar to a new level, just that general creativity and influence. I'm not sure there's been a player since Eddie who's added such a new, untapped, pun intended, rich areas of technique to explore. On that note, we'll be focusing on his use of tapping and symmetrical scales, which along with harmonics to me are the most quintessential Van Halen playing traits. Timestamps and chapters for each lick are below, and if you like this format designed to be as easy as possible for you to get the information you want from the video, let me know with a like and a comment. They only take a few seconds to do and genuinely really help out the videos and the channel in general. So by the end of this you should have 4 Eddie Van Halen licks and an idea of why they sound the way they do. Some proper vintage Eddie, you'll hear this all over his playing. We're tapping this 12th fret, we've got a grace note slide from the 6th to the 7th fret on the same string, then using some pedal point tapping, basically returning to this note, this one that's higher in pitch in between the other notes, more of that concept with a little eye up there, going down the blues scale and then adding in some vibrato on the last note. You want to sort of flick the string after you tap it to get a nice strong sound. Essentially it's like a pull off but with your right hand, so you can either flick downwards or upwards. Both are totally legitimate, it's just what's more comfortable. So in terms of the scales, this is an A minor blues, we're tapping A, which is the root, and we're going down, sliding into the 5th from the flat 5th, tapping the root again, down to the flat 5th, aka the blues note, root once more, 4th, tapping again, and then the flat 3rd. final scale run from the iconic jump solo. We're touching on the second main concept here that I want to address, which is symmetrical scales. I'd planned a video to go into way more depth on this topic some time ago, so do let me know in the comments if that piques your interest. If your hammers are a bit weak sounding, check out the tips with the legato video in the eye up there. Anyway, you might want to lightly palm mute the first 6, or maybe even 12 notes. Just a tiny bit of palm muting at the bridge just to tighten it up and clean it up a tiny little bit. Then what we're basically doing is just picking each string once and using legato, hammering on it all the way. Going from the A to D strings twice, those are the ones you might want to palm mute. Then just ascending through the G, B and high E. I should actually mention on the high E you're just doing a hammer on and pull off, rather than the 3 hammer-ons we've done on the other strings, but you probably worked out from the tab. I think Eddie would alternate pick this, going down, up through the strings, but you might find economy picking, so using all downs to be easier. To be honest, what sounds the best, just go with that. There's no point making this stuff any harder than it needs to be. To try and keep this final bit of vibrato nice here, what you want to do is make sure you're not holding the note sharp, so rather than holding it there, as we sometimes do as guitarists, just make sure it always returns to pitch. It's going to sound a lot cleaner. In terms of the music theory, we're playing over a G sharp, which changes to C sharp before resolving down a semitone to C. At this point, we play its 5th, which is that 15th fret on the high E. But again, too bogged down in note choice. In a nutshell, a symmetrical scale is adding a bit of tension. You're just using the same shape across the fretboard. You know, this one here, the semitone tone. Like if you did it all the way. Just adding a little bit of edge with the note choice there. But because it starts off more or less outlining a C sharp mixolydian and is played at a fairly high pace, it's not some overly dissonant, difficult to listen to train wreck. If you want to try this trick out, just make sure to use this shape over a chord starting on this note here. It's a C sharp, but say we were playing over an E, we could just move the scale to accommodate that. Just be careful with the E and B strings. Unless you're resolving a semitone lower like in the actual song, these notes are going to get pretty spicy pretty quickly. It's a sound not too far off Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, or George Lynch from Dokken, more in his type of the exotic sound with a little I up there. As a total side note, I had never before noticed the rhythmic complexity of the solo section laid down expertly by Alex Van Halen and Michael Anthony. Just always caught up in Eddie's ripping solo, but damn. That's some borderline epic progressive rock stuff going on, and it doesn't even feel disjointed. Probably one of the toughest parts about writing heavily syncopated riffs and grooves is making them feel natural until you have a closer listen. Alright, first up, if there's a neater way to sustain a bend and play it multiple times in Guitar Pro, hit me up in the comments. That is admittedly a bit of a dog's dinner, for which I do apologise, but it's the best I could do. So what we're going to do is hit the 7th fret. Sometimes Eddie would hit these bends with a partial or full pinch harmonic. In this one he just rakes into it. And make sure you rake into it, so you get that nice kind of attack there. We're bending it a tone, releasing it and pulling off to the 5th fret, hammering on, and then bending it a tone again, releasing it once more. So the second time you're not picking it. So you're hitting it once and doing the bend, release, pull off, and then just hammer on the note and bend again. So when you're doing this, you basically want to take your plectrum and hide it in whichever part of your hand. I always cradle the pick kind of in here. I don't know how easy that is to see, because I tend to tap with my index finger. If you tap with your middle finger, you know, you don't really need to move the pick, but it's a chance to get your hand in position nonetheless. When we pull off to the 5th fret a second time, I think of that as the start of the tapping section of the lick. It sort of leads in, and I just find it easier to chunk that way. So we got that. And you're going to hammer on the 7th, tap the 12th, pull off to the 7th, pull off to the 5th, and And this happens twice, so you have this. Do that a bit slower. Just make sure that the tap note is faster than the other ones. It's that falling down the stairs but landing on your feet sound that Eddie loved to play with. After this, we're essentially bending the 7th fret up to pitch quite slowly by a tone. At the same time, we're tapping this 12th fret 3 times. Start with a tap on the 12th fret, pull off to the 7th fret, bend it about a quarter tone, tap again, pull off to the 7th again, bend it a little bit more, a final tap, pull off, and now you want that 7th fret to be bent by a tone. So you're just slowly, it's almost like a kind of siren type sound, isn't it? While this next bar may look pretty intimidating, it's not actually so bad, especially if you're a regular here. Shout out to Lick Squad Elite, you guys rock. In which case you might have already checked out this Extend Your Bends video tackling this very technique. Anyway, sustain this bend, which isn't the easiest thing to do. That in itself is somewhat demanding while you're doing all this tapping up here. But while you sustain that bend, you tap all of these frets. And while we're tapping what would be a G harmonic minor scale, because of the string being bent by a tone, all the notes will be pitched into key, which is A minor, the key of A minor. So the first pattern is going up in groups of 3. Do that again, so you can just see I'm going up the scale in kind of 3, back 1, and up again another 3. I feel like me saying all the frets that you tap and where you pull off to is going to make it more complicated than it needs to be, so I'm just going to play this, what we've got so far, twice more in isolation. Alright, so when we tap that 17th fret, we start kind of coming down in thirds. So we got our tone bend going on, and we're kind of going. So you're basically missing out a note from the scale and then going back up one and repeating that same idea. This lick is rounded up by adding some really nice vibrato to that 12th fret. It's not an easy thing to do at all, but it gives it that distinctive Van Halen nuance. It's almost like country sound. For some tips on adding vibrato to bends, check out the little eye up there. Yeah, so we got that 7th fret bent by a tone, and then we're finally tapping the 12th fret, adding some vibrato, pull off to that 7th fret that's still bent, release it to pitch, and then pull off to the 5th fret, again adding in a bit of vibrato just to wrap everything up. So what I'll do now is play that tapping bit by itself in isolation. So I've got a couple of tips here in terms of the technique. You might notice that I'm kind of resting my hand and my thumb and my fingers over the strings when I'm pulling off. This final bit after the vibrato, it's just in case these strings kind of ring out. I managed to avoid it there. In terms of the actual tapping, I had to cut my nail down for this because it was really, really slowing me down. It sounds ridiculous, but like a millimeter can make all the difference. The really hard thing to do here is to keep this note bent and stop the strings from ringing out. So if you're bending it upwards like I am here, this is also why I'm using this guitar instead of a humbucker, as my Ibanez guitars have got a slightly fatter neck and it was a lot more difficult to keep clean. The strap, because the neck's thinner, it was easy to keep cleaner. So you got that bent by a tone. If you're pushing it up like I am here, you can bring your thumb over the top to try and mute these strings. The real trick is making sure that the D string doesn't get under this finger, because if it does every time you tap, you're just going to get loads of noise and slop. You can try pulling it down. I didn't have much luck, as you can probably hear from that, doing it that way. The other thing is what angle you come at the string with your tap, because if you come at it straight above, you're more likely to hit other strings. If you come at it from a slight angle, whether here or here, here probably makes more sense to me. I managed to keep it a tiny bit cleaner that way. The final thing is you've got a bit of a play off here between gain and your noise gate. So if you have a noise gate, it's going to cancel out the string noise, but it's going to be harder for the taps to sound out. So you just got to find the right balance for you, your kind of personal sweet spot, as it were. In terms of the theory, we're in A minor, playing a pentatonic lick for the first half, bending the 4th to the 5th, returning to pitch, going up to the flat 3rd. The note we're tapping is the flat 7th. And then when the tapping bit comes in, we've got some kind of cool microtonal vibes going on when it's bending up to pitch, those 3. But after that, we're back into A minor, playing a tasty little harmonic minor lick. With the unbent string, if you're just picking the notes, you get this melody. But obviously, because the string's bent, it's pitched up a tone, so we get the major 7th, root, 2nd, root, 2nd, flat 3rd. They're just going up in the kind of same way, 2nd, flat 3rd, 4th, then coming back down, so 2nd, flat 3rd, root, 2nd, the major 7th, and then the root. That last root is obviously the last tap we do on the 12th fret when we've got to bend up a tone. We're pulling off then to the 5th, releasing it to the 4th, pulling off to the flat 3rd. So here it's more about the timbre, mixing up typical blues scales with tapping techniques, neoclassical licks, and I'd argue a little bit of country or at least a southern rock vibe with that last little chunk. Eddie Van Halen would do a load of variations on this type of idea, the neoclassical tapping bit, and also that initial bend thing. So as a sort of bonus tip, here's a variation of that. We're going to do a really similar thing, but rather than just raking into it, we're going to hit it with a pinch harmonic. Or at least a partial pinch for the first one. Hammering on again, and then doing another bend. Releasing it to pitch, just like before. But this time we're going to tap the 12th fret, and then slide up off the fretboard. So it doesn't really matter where you come off the fretboard, you can go all the way, or you can kind of lift your finger up somewhere around, I don't know, the 17th to kind of 15th fret, and it's going to sound alright. It doesn't matter too much, you just want that sound. And when you come off, make sure to give the string a flick, just as you would when you're tapping, so you get a stronger sound. So if I don't flick it, that wasn't too bad. And if you do flick it, stronger again. And the variation goes like this. Classic lick from Hot for Teacher. Here we've got the two main themes of tapping and symmetrical scales all rolled into one. There are a few tricks here. First up, the initial 3 notes sort of act as a lead-in. They're in triplets, the rest are all 16ths, so just watch out for the timing a little bit here. We pretty much have a 5-note pattern that goes across the strings. 2 hard things here. 1, this gives us a displaced rhythm, playing 5 notes where the beat would suggest 4, so the phrase keeps getting pushed off by 1 beat every time we repeat it. And 2, when you change strings, you lead with a hammer-on from nowhere rather than a tap, which can be a bit counterintuitive. With these in mind, let's just break it down. We start off with a tap on the 12th fret, pulling off to the 5th, hammering on the 8th. That's that little triplet bit. Starting on the add of 4, so you'd have 1, add 2, add 3, add 4. And then we lead into the next bar. After that, we've got another tap on the 12th. Then we're pulling off to the 8th, 7th, and then the 5th. And then what we do is we hammer on from nowhere onto the B string. Right? So, little lead in. Then you got this pattern. And that is the 5-note pattern that we take all across the string. So I'll do this in isolation just to get you a feel for it. I suggest playing that by itself as well, and if you kind of chunk that in your mind as one pattern, once it clicks, we'll just kind of take this 5-note group across the strings. So let's just go for the B string. Just the same thing. Okay, then try them together. So the temptation may be to lead with a tap. That's not what we want to do. This is why I suggest to do it in isolation. You want to lead essentially with this note after that little lead in. And like I say, we're just taking this 5-note pattern to the A string. The only difference is when we're on the A string, after we pull off to this 5th fret, just pull off to the open, and that resolves the lick. In terms of the music theory, we have an A minor arpeggio starting off with a 5th, pulling off to the root, then hammer onto the flat 3rd. And essentially we've got a Dorian blues scale, so the notes we're tapping are just these. Just so you can kind of visualise it a bit better. And going through this Dorian blues, it's all business as usual until we get a tiny bit of modal interchange where we're touching on Phrygian and passing on this 8th fret on the D string. We then go down, and then when we get to the A string here, we're kind of hinting at Aeolian, because that's, or I suppose Phrygian still, because it's the flat 6, going down to the 5th, the 4th, and then pulling off to the root. We can play the same frets on the low E string, as the symmetrical scale word suggests, and also because we have in fact already played them on the high E string. In this context, Eddie is probably hearing an A minor. It's the tonal centre, so you'd want to use this scale in a similar manner, building it from a minor chord on the low string. So like again, this is the root of the symmetrical scale. For example, if we moved it up a tone, and played some sort of scalar run here. We'd now have a lick in B minor. The only thing to bear in mind here is you probably want to start and end on a safer note, for example the root, the flat 3rd, or the 5th. They're always a safe bet to make these kind of outlicks sound more intentional. Now I am more than happy to dive into more Van Halen licks, so just let me know if you want them. Personally, I'd like to go into the more kind of zany or noise guitar stuff, that's kind of my bag, I really like that stuff, but I might be alone there. So speaking of which, we didn't really get to look at his tapped harmonics, which you can get under your fingers with that video. This has been Signature Guitar Licks, that's the playlist there. But yeah, hit subscribe to keep up to date with the channel, leave me a comment, check out the tabs on my Patreon, and enable all notifications by ringing that little bell on the side if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.